Cupid Parasite is an otome dating sim, aka a visual novel where you vie to romance your choice of handsome hunks while playing as a female character. This was released last year and I nearly forgot why I put it down halfway through, but that was actually because I was waiting for a very minor patch that I probably could have done without, so I'm glad I got back to it in the end. In Cupid Parasite, you play as a career-focused bridal consultant for a matchmaking company. Oh, and you are actually literally Cupid. After arguing with your father about marriage rates, you set out to prove that humans don't need divine intervention. You're currently set up for the final promotion needed to prove yourself, but in order to get it, you'll have to help a group of men so hopeless in their love lives that they've been called the Parasite 5. We have Gil, the lovelorn loser who can't get over his first love, Monsieur S, who is all about success and prestige, but for some reason won't show up to his own dates, Roll, a high-profile actor whose charms are quickly deflated by his mythology obsession, Ryuki, a young fashion designer who rates everything by looks, and no woman has yet met his standards of glamour, and finally Alan, a thieving man who prefers women that are already in love. Needless to say, you've got your work cut out for you. The common route lets you get to know these men pretty well, and is very entertaining. In fact, this is probably the most light-hearted dating sim I've played in quite a while. Not that there aren't any serious moments, but there's also a lot of very zany ones too. As is the usual case, you'll be presented with choices at key moments which can either increase the recipient's affection towards you, or in some cases, slam the brakes immediately into a bad end. One nice feature about this game is that when you've made the right decision, you can see some love hearts appear. But if you prefer to take your chances, you can turn this off in the settings. Though you don't actually need to get all of the answers right to get the best ending either. Another thing that'll appear pretty early on is a love quiz. This determines your love type, which matches with each of your potential beaux. After the first run through, you'll be able to simply choose which one you are, which is good since in order to get the best ending, you'll need to match. Some of the normal endings are still perfectly nice, come with their own CGs, and in a couple of cases I actually preferred them. It especially seems a bit silly that you need to have the exact love type as they do for your relationship to work out for the best. Aside from the usual skip options, there is a chapter selectability shown via a flowchart, which is very handy for trying to figure out how to get certain endings. While there were a couple of characters I was very much not interested in dating, I still enjoyed the romance with them, and in fact, actually the best boy of this game was the one I did not care for at all initially, and I think it's better than the extra true route. The story has a great mix of romance as it is very much love themed, even while dealing with the men's personal struggles, but there's tons of humour as well. Now, there are no hate scenes or anything in this game, but it is slightly more spicy than some of the other console dating sims I've played. Nothing more is shown than kissing and male toplessness, but there's definitely some slight descriptions of when you get intimate with some of the characters to a little bit, so just keep that in mind. Actually, the first thing I noticed about this game is the art style, and not just that of the characters, the UI and the backgrounds are very much in your face. I'm not quite sure what I'd call it, but the various locations are absolutely bursting with colour, patterns, and seem to have a mix of detail and much flatter areas of colour and shine. Thankfully, you can change the transparency on the UI so the stripes and polka dots don't get in the way of your reading. In fact, you can remove them entirely, and you have 4 fonts to choose from, which is great. There were only a few text errors, but I think sometimes it was hard to tell if your character was talking to herself or whoever was by her. That said, the style of the character art itself was also quite pretty, although I'm offended that a guy with this for his hair has the audacity to comment on my appearance. I really liked the eye shapes and the fashion range, with the MC probably having the best style of any Otome Pro tag I've played with, to the extent that I wanted her to have a bigger wardrobe so I could see even cooler clothes. The soundtrack is also pretty striking, some of it's rather loud and upbeat. There's quite a few vocal tracks which are thankfully not too distracting from the scenes, and Alan's theme in particular works very well. I can't quite think of how to describe some of them, but aside from the usual romantic or tense tracks, there's some beachy and funky tunes too. Again, there is no English voice acting, which is pretty typical. I just feel like the higher priced otomes could probably do with them, though I had just discovered that the American pricing for these games is a bit nicer than what we get in Australia, which is true with games in general, but maybe my complaints on this end aren't as valid. There is still voice acting in Japanese. I do think that the car honk that happens when you back out within the menus could get a bit annoying if you're fiddling in them enough, but it's all to go with that Los York flavour, I suppose. Obviously, once again, you have your typical gallery for your collected CGs, so the illustrated images you collect while going through the stories, background music, and different scenes. The game took me over 25 hours, which is a decent length, though a fair bit of time was probably spent trying to hunt for some of the bad endings I still can't seem to trigger. Cupid Parasite isn't necessarily the best dating sim ever, though I don't think I've yet played one I could call that, but there's not really any great flaws either. Though I suppose without spoiling too much, I feel like the secret route sort of really half-asses it with making everyone happy in the end in comparison to some other stories, but I suppose that's because everyone isn't quite as interconnected in this game. It is still a definite recommendation, especially if your heart is aching for something with a little more punch, zap, and pizzazz. I give Cupid Parasite an 8 out of 10. Bye!